Our Violent Ends, Chapter 15. It was late afternoon by the time the train arrived at Kunshan, and even later by the time Roma and Juliet finished speaking to the authorities, because what qualified for authorities here was no more than men in flimsy uniforms blanching at the sight of the bodies. What could have taken 10 minutes instead took 2 hours of Juliet making threats and yelling, "Do you know who I am?" before they had the bodies removed and a completed list of victims. The bodies went to storage, and messengers were sent in cars to Shanghai en route to notify both the Scarlet Gang and the White Flowers what had happened. They sent men out along the tracks too, traipsing through the hills to look for the escaped monster, but Juliet doubted they would find anything, not with their level of incompetence. By the time she summoned Scarlets to drive out and search for them, she was sure the monster would be long gone. "Outrageous," Juliet said, still grumbling as she and Roma left the railway station. "Utter outrage." "It is expected," Roma replied evenly. "I imagine they have never before encountered such mass casualties." Irked, Juliet swiveled her narrow eyes at him, but opted to remain quiet. They had not spoken about whatever it was that had happened between them on the train, and if that was the way Roma wanted to play it, then Juliet was happy to oblige. It seemed that they were to pretend it never happened, even if Juliet could hardly look in Roma's direction now without all the little hairs on her arms sticking up. She shouldn't have kissed him back. He hated her, but that didn't override their whole past, nor the instinctive tug that had always drawn them into collision with each other, like meteors in orbit. Juliet knew what was going on in his head because it was exactly what she had been circling around some few months ago, so why had she become so thoughtless as to give in? Even if he didn't hate her as deeply as he said he did, it was all the more dangerous. The whole point of lying to him was to keep him away. The whole point was that they couldn't do this again, because the moment he saw through her, then their city of blood would catch up to them. And perhaps they could be together at last, if it was together in death. And what was love, if all it did was kill? A car? With a start, Juliet realized she hadn't been listening, and only now registered Roma's suggestion, glancing upon the road. After handling the bodies, they had asked an officer for the directions to their destination, and the route was a simple, albeit hefty, walk. Kunshan was classified a city, but it was a far cry from Shanghai. Rather than a living, breathing entity that turned inside out upon itself in an effort to find space, Kunshan was a small lasso on a map, a grouping of 10 or so quiet towns that sat side by side with little activity past its day-to-day humdrum energy. This place was easy to navigate because it was quiet and still, but it also meant it was impossible to hide within, should they pick up a tail. "No, we can't take a car," Juliet replied. She peered over her shoulder, eyeing the few officers that remained standing by the railway station, deep in conversation. "The blackmailer is on to us. We would be too easy to follow." Roma looked back too, frowning when he saw that Juliet was still watching Kunshan's useless administrative officers. Them? Obviously not. Juliet hurried along. At this rate, the sun would have set by the time they reached the address. The cold was biting enough already, but once night fell, it would be almost unbearable to stand outside, especially when Juliet's thick coat was a tad more fashionable than it was practical. "However, I thought about it," she continued. "That man was sent after us in the train car, but he took his damn time transforming. Paul Dexter is the one who vaccinated me, so I cannot imagine that his collaborator does not know I am immune. They weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to scare us. Collateral damage be damned." A bell rang somewhere in the distance. Its echoes bounced down the flat row of buildings erected stoutly on the other side of the road. As Roma and Juliet walked around the footpath, a thin river flowed gently in their left, lapping into the fading evening. Sometimes Juliet forgot that this was how the rest of the country lived. The farther one receded from the coastal cities, they also receded from coastal control, from power-hungry nationalists and invading foreigners. They receded away from places where every move felt like life and death, and instead, the river trickled into a wider stream. When a small bird came to perch upon a rock jutting from the riverbed, it barely disturbed the flow of the water. Instead, they had a place to breathe. "Believe it or not," Roma said now, "this monster attack was a good thing." Juliet pulled her attention away from the water, searching for the next street sign. The last thing they needed was to get lost. I do beg your pardon. The bodies on their way to the morgue would argue otherwise. Heaven rest their souls, obviously. I do not wish for more death. Roma's words were edged with a bite. When we return to Shanghai, I can root through every white flower within our ranks until I find exactly who that Frenchman was, and if our trip here does not prove useful, then finding whoever that monster was may be a faster way to trace back to the blackmailer. Juliet didn't see a point in arguing. Nothing was stopping Roma from refusing to share the information with her if their next course of action was solely down to him. But if she got heated about it, then he got heated back, and they would start screaming at each other again, because it was too easy to lean into anger for just a split second of truth. For a sign that Juliet wasn't entirely lost to him, Roma would pick a fight. In a moment of weakness to glimpse the Roma she loved, Juliet would entertain it. It was a volatile game. She needed to stop. She couldn't keep doing this. If she had to turn cold, then so be it. So all Juliet said aloud was, "I hope this trip proves useful, then." She gestured for them to move along, glancing once more over her shoulder. "I suspect we are here," Roma said. He stopped looking at the sight ahead with an undisguised puzzlement stamped onto his expression. Juliet, too, searched along the row of shops, thinking that they were misunderstanding something. They were not. The address for the alleged vaccine center was a wonton shop. "They advertise this place across the whole French concession," Juliet exclaimed. She couldn't hold back the accusatory tone in her voice, though she was not quite sure whom she was putting at blame here. "It can't possibly be a scheme just to have more customers for a bowl of hun tong tang." Roma suddenly pulled 2 revolvers from the inside of his suit jacket, one tucked on each side. Juliet blinked at his fast handiwork and absently wondered how she had felt them when she was pressed up against him earlier. "It cannot be a mere shop," he said. "Let's go, Juliet." By the time Juliet retrieved her pistol, Roma had already charged ahead and kicked at the shop door. Juliet hurried after him, feeling rather foolish to be storming into a wonton shop of all places, and found Roma by the register demanding an audience with whoever had the nerve to be distributing a new vaccine. In the far corner there was only one elderly couple in the shop, eyes wide and concerned. "Please, please!" the man behind the register shrieked, immediately putting his hands up. He was old too, but at the end of middle age, hair long and pulled back with a band. "Don't shoot! I am not who you were looking for!" Juliet tucked her pistol away, making eye contact with the elderly couple and jabbing a sharp thumb toward the door. Not needing to be prompted twice, they hobbled to their feet and gathered their bags, scuttling out of the shop. The door slammed after them so quickly that the ceiling light flickered. "Then who is?" Roma asked. "Who owns this place?" The man's throat bobbed up and down as he swallowed nervously. I do." While Roma kept his weapons upon the shop owner, Juliet leaned onto the register and peered around the back of the shop. A cursory sweep revealed a table dusted with flour, a lump of dough hardening by the sink, and there, by the chair... "Well, I see that the flyers originated from here, so no use lying your way out," Juliet said cheerily. "Lao Tu, how are you making the vaccine?" The man blinked, his clear terror suddenly morphing into confusion. "Making the vaccine?" he echoed. His head pivoted back to Roma, eyes crossing to stare down the barrel of the revolver. "No, I am not making anything. I am auctioning off the last vial that remains from the Larkspur of Shanghai." Juliet pushed off the register. She exchanged a fast glance with Roma, and then, caring little for social propriety, she climbed right up on the counter in her heels and hopped to the back of the shop, retrieving one of the flyers. It was identical to the ones that the Ernestine de Donadio had given them, down to the error-riddled French. Only this time Juliet realized exactly what mistake they had made. "The madness arrives again. Get vaccinated." Where did it say that the location upon the advertisement would be giving out vaccinations? They had merely assumed because that was what the Larkspur's flyers had said. "Tame de," Juliet cursed, throwing the flyer down. "You have one?" The man nodded eagerly, seeing it was this information getting the 2 gangsters off his back. "I was hoping to collect offers from foreigners, then sell to the highest bidder. I am low on cash, you see. It is not easy running a Hontun shop in Kanshan, and when my cousin from Shanghai passed along this vial he had held up on— Oh, stop talking, I do beg, Juliet interrupted, holding a hand up. This was not a vaccine center at all. This was an auction. With a sigh, Roma withdrew his revolvers, shoving them back into his jacket. He was visibly annoyed. This had been a waste of time. What could they do with one vial? They'd already asked Lawrence at the White Flowers lab to test the vaccine the last time around in an effort to recreate it, but he had not been successful. Juliet's eyes widened suddenly. Lawrence had failed in the past, but the Scarlets had Paul's papers now. I'll take it, Juliet said, her declaration coming so loud and so abrupt that the man jumped. In a small motion, Juliet bent and swept up the flyer and plucked a fountain pen from the side of the register, scribbling down a number. My offer. The man peered at the sum, his jaw dropping immediately. I cannot simply agree. I must send telegrams in case there are higher bidders. Double it, Roma cut in. When Juliet's gaze shot to him sharply, he smiled, the expression mocking. We will share, won't we, Miss Kai? What do you think you're doing? Juliet demanded in Russian. She pasted on her own smile, so that the shop owner would not realize they had switched to a different language to argue. They didn't need the shop owner deciding his vaccine was in high demand. You already ran tests, remember? Lawrence can't re-engineer it. He could only determine that it is true. Yes, Roma agreed. This time we do not have materials from Paul Dexter, remember? We can steal them from you, and if you want this vial that badly, I'm sure you think having it will cause a breakthrough alongside the papers. Juliet almost started vibrating with her near irritation. He had read through her through and through. He always did. If Xia Ye and Xiaoxi want their own, the man supplied, hands ringing in front of him. There was a new nervousness in his air. He had figured it out then. Connected the dots on Juliet's and Roma's identities, as soon as Roma had called her Miss Kai. It was not hard to see that the heirs of the Shanghai native Scarlet Gang and Russian White Flowers stood before him. There were 2 in circulation after the Larkspur went under. He reached for another slip of paper, and with the same fountain pen Juliet had been using quickly began scribbling. The second is in Susang, and this is the seller and address. Forget it, Juliet said. We only need one, so don't think you can siphon double the money from us. Take it or leave it. The shop owner paused. Juliet could imagine the cogs turning in his head, calculating the chances that there could be a higher bidder and the risk he could invite if he turned down Shanghai's gangsters. Without a word, the man dropped into a crouch and started to enter a combination into a safe under the register, one that Juliet had not even noticed. She frowned, and he seemed to sense it, because as he twirled the combination dial, he said, People get desperate, and I cannot afford guards. The safe hissed open. The man reached in and came out the vial, glistening the same lapis lazuli blue that Juliet remembered. She shuddered. I don't suppose you have cash on you, do you? We'll send IOUs, Roma replied without missing a beat. The shop owner knew who they were, after all. He knew they were big and mighty enough to keep their word. The Scarlet Gang and the White Flowers had the money. All they had was money, really. Well, thank you for your business, the shop owner said gleefully, watching Roma and Juliet scrawl their names on the same sheet Juliet had scribbled her offer on. He was right to be gleeful. He had just become very, very rich. The 2 gangs would feel the effect of this payment, but it was nothing they couldn't recover from. The Scarlets had recovered time and time again after paying the blackmailer. I will be holding on to this, Juliet said, gesturing for the vial and shooting Roma a warning glance. Roma did not complain. He let the shop owner press the vial into Juliet's hands, and while her palm was out, the man tucked in the slip of paper with the address of the second seller. You should take this anyway. Juliet shoved both into her pocket. Roma only watched the motion wearily, his eyes glowering black, like he suspected she would perform a magic trick to make the vial disappear. She wouldn't be surprised if he tried to take a grab for it at some point on their way back to the city. Don't even think about it, she mouthed. Wouldn't imagine it, he mouthed back. So, the man said into silence that had fallen, would you 2 like a bowl of wontons?